everyone, my name is Mia and I will be your aviation history teacher of the day. Today I want to go over some basic BVR principles within the MiG-29 in a Fox 1 setting. I want to cover a basic explanation of radar modes, the best climb profile to use, and when to shoot. I will not cover the IRST today, that will be in a separate video as it is a lot to get into and for BVR not quite useful. I see quite a lot of people claim that the MiG-29 is entirely useless for BVR against Blue 4 4th Gen fighters, and I think that is ridiculous. The MiG-29 is amazing in closer range fights and in a dogfight. Don't get me wrong, but you are not using the R-27s to their fullest potential if you are not climbing up high and doing BVR fights. You're wasting a lot of kills and even more fun that you could be having with your module. I think when you actually try to use the MiG in this way, you will find it to be surprisingly capable of holding its own against Hornets with AIM-7Fs and everything else that Blue 4 can really throw at you. Let's start by going over our basic radar modes and their speed limits. Firstly, we have the head-on mode. The head-on mode is our primary BVR mode, giving us the most range and the most secure lock when the opponent is facing us. The radar can detect targets up to 150 kilometers in the head-on mode, and there is practically no speed limit for us to worry about. The problem with head-on mode is that the lock drops incredibly quickly when the enemy changes their aspect by about 60 degrees to either side, for example, during a crank. For those aspects, we have pursuit mode. In pursuit mode, the radar is limited to about 50 kilometers of range and most importantly, has a 1,100 kilometers an hour radial speed limit. This means that if you are in the afterburner facing the enemy and the enemy is also in an afterburner facing you, that limit is incredibly quickly broken and you will lose luck immediately in pursuit. There's two things to keep in mind about pursuit mode. Firstly, we want to use it when the enemy has about a 60-degree aspect to us, to minimize chances of breaking the speed limit. To visualize this, imagine at a 0-degree aspect the speed limit is effectively 1,100 kilometers an hour. At 30 degrees, this becomes about 1,250 kilometers an hour, and at 60 degrees, already over 2,100 kilometers an hour. So it is best to wait until the little arrow at the bottom left of your HUD, showing where the enemy is facing, looks like this roughly. Secondly, the co-op mode forces your radar into pursuit mode. So even if you have the head-on mode selected and you are already in a lock, the second you turn on co-op, the radar will be in pursuit. And if the closure is above 1,100 kilometers an hour, the lock will just be gone, just like that. I personally recommend waiting till you turn the knob to pursuit and then changing co-op. There's also the close combat mode, which for a BVR video is not relevant, but to quickly cover it, it has a 10-kilometer range and is good for, as the name might suggest, closer ranges. Did all of that make sense? Great, I'm so glad. Now, a lock is all good and great, but we also need to shoot our missiles. Ideally, we want to be shooting our R-27Rs further than the enemy can shoot their AIM-7Fs. To achieve this, we have two primary concerns. Firstly, our speed. The faster we are, the further we can shoot the R-27. And secondly, our altitude. The higher up we are, the less dense the air becomes, and the further we can shoot the R-27. To get our preferred combat speed and altitude, this is the profile I personally use. As you can see, we take off and we climb at Mach 0.9 roughly up until we hit 12 to 14 kilometers of altitude. There's always a bit of room to play depending on the scenario you are in, how far the enemy is, where you spawned in relation to the front line, and how much fuel you have, etc, etc. But between 12 and 14 kilometers should always work. Once you are there, you level out a bit and speed up to about Mach 1.2. Mach 1.2 is the worst point of acceleration we have in the MiG-29 currently, so from here on out, the faster you get after Mach 1.2, the better. To do this, I here initiate a shallow dive to 9 to 10 kilometers whilst being in full burner. I want to become as fast as possible and you will likely end up around Mach 1.4 to 1.8, depending on how much fuel you want to use and how much time and space that you've had to work. At those speeds, depending on your enemy's altitude, you can shoot the R-27 for up to 45 kilometers, and it allows for some really fun BVR. Now, most of the time you're going to shoot it roughly 30 kilometers because the enemy typically does not fly very high. Whilst Blue 4 players could do the same to get the most out of their AIM-7Fs, they in reality almost never do. I don't know why they don't, but I am not complaining. It is free kills for every single person on Red 4, so let's take advantage of it. As you can see, I have a target locked up here. The max range indicator bar is showing at a max range of about 29 kilometers, and at this point, before firing, my eyes are fully focused on the aspect arrow to see any changes in what the enemy is doing, like entering the crank, as well as on the EWR screen. When we enter max range here, I actually want to wait a little bit to shoot to get my missiles a better chance. I do not always do this, but here I can tell the enemy hasn't fired yet, as they have not started the crank, so I should be okay. I fire my R27R at 25 kilometers, going Mach 1.55, whilst the enemy is not just below me, but also only going at about Mach 1.1 as checked in tech view after the fight. They fire an AIM-7F at about the same distance, but it has to work much harder with much worse conditions to reach me than my R27R has. I pull off to the side into a crank with my eyes locked in on the diamond to make sure I'm staying in a crank. I could have cranked more here and it wasn't a perfect engagement, but it was enough to keep the lock and defeat the incoming Sparrow. The reason I ended up losing lock here is because my missile hit and I won the engagement. Let's take a look at another engagement here, this time against an F-15C. I'm following EWR closely and I notice an F-15E Strike Eagle. But the Strike Eagle ends up turning to the side, so I mentally shift focus onto the next target already, the F-15C on the EWR. I turn left and enter the TWF mode, which I highly recommend you use, it's genuinely so good. It picks up the target at about 70 kilometers here. I then correct my heading in relation to the target by looking at the EWR, as well as just the long bar at the bottom of the HUD, trying to center it basically. TWF takes care of my delta H, and I do not have to worry about the altitude settings whatsoever. I just have to fly in the right direction at my current speed. The max range bar is at 30 kilometers, and once we get around that number, the TWF mode, as you just saw, will automatically lock the target for me. I can see the updated range at about 26 kilometers now, and I will shoot at about 1 kilometer after passing so. I fired at Mach 1.9 and 9 kilometers altitude. This recording is from a while ago and I was even more rusty than normally, so I do not enter my crank properly here, but ideally you should. You can hear the click as I change my mode to pursuit. There you go. And I pull off aggressively to the side here. I'm actually about to lose lock here, and at first I thought that they notched me. And I start to pull in to regain lock from a missile to still hit, but then I check the chat as a precaution. I can see that my R27R hit their Sparrow missile, which does confuse me, but I come to the conclusion it probably killed them, and the missile, so that I pull off to the side again, just in case that they're still alive and shooting at me. Turns out I was right, and here's the confirmation. So I guess it must have hit the AIM-7F as well as the plane at the same time, so I guess I got technically a double kill. In this last example, I want to showcase how you can deal with an enemy that is running away from you and is turned cold. This used to be more of a problem, but it still can sometimes happen, especially with Blue 4 players, so I'm going to show you how to deal with it. As you can see by the diamond on the HUD, I was pulled off to the side here, but I will now come back to the center. Here I check F10 because I'm terrified of running into the hawk side up ahead. I don't get a launch running with my radar on, so I am incredibly scared it'll obliterate me. I'm now going to pull off aggressively to the left side, placing the diamond right on the edge of the HUD at an aspect where I can still see the enemy, but it's about at its limits, so the enemy will now, in theory, for them, it'll look like I might be pulling off. To cement that, I drop lock. And the sudden switch of the RWR being quiet and the EWR showing me in a flanking aspect will likely make the enemy think that I am trying to turn away. So I was right, they see that, they turn in. I can turn my radar to the side aspect, get a lock, but here I forgot to switch to head-on mode, so I immediately lose it. Here I see a friendly marking, so I have to check F10, but I still lock it with TWF, so I'm 99% sure it is not friendly, and I get a lock. It is indeed not friendly, and I fire at it. I fired the R27 at a slight loft, passing 15 kilometers, and I pull off aggressively to the side here, placing the diamond right on the edge of the HUD. This is what a crank should look like. Here I consider firing an R73 to solidify the kill, but right as I think about it more, it loses tracking, because my R27 actually impacts them. My fuel here is pretty low, so I'm just going to RTB, even though I still have 2 R73s on my wings, because there's no real point in running into a fight with only R73s. At around 700 kilograms of fuel nonetheless. It's just a suicide mission if I did so. So I prefer to RTB, get a nice little landing, and it's much more fun in my opinion. I hope these examples showcased a little bit of how to BVR in the MiG-29. I know that they're not perfect examples, but that is often what multiplayer PvP is. It's hectic and it's not perfect. What matters is that you give your missile every advantage it can possibly have, and the MiG-29 happens to be an amazing airframe for that, even with the current drag issues. It's a lot of fun, and honestly, it's pretty successful with BVR. I highly recommend each and every single one of you MiG-29 pilots to not listen to somebody that tells you it's only good at visual range combat with R73s. Go out there and sling your R27Rs at 40 kilometers onto some unsuspecting Hornet. It will work as long as you follow the guidelines of your radar rule set and that you go fast enough. A lot of that changes with modern, and I will cover how to fight in a 90s era where the enemy might have AIM-120s or incredibly long-range Fox 1s. You have the ERs obviously, but I prefer in a Fox 3 setting at least to use the R27 ETs. Again, I will cover all of this in a different video because it would take another 20 minutes, and I just want to get this video about BVR with radar and Fox 1 combat out first. There's a few limiting factors as to how effective you are going to be in BVR with the MiG-29. The main one of that is the altitude and speed that you use, but on the other hand there's also things that you cannot really influence, such as your teammates, what they're doing, and if they're helping you at all, if there's GCI online, or if you're relying on EWR alone. I hope that this gave you a little bit of an insight on how I do BVR and motivated you to try it yourself. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I appreciate any questions that you leave in the comments for me, and I'm so thankful for the positive feedback on my last video. Seriously, thank you all so much. I hope you had fun, and if you have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask me. Thank you so much.